Sometimes a news story breaks that I might think is interesting, but I might not feel like I have enough to say about that news story to warrant making a video. Sometimes I also am just fearful of stepping into that topic and having to read the comments, so I let it slide. One such news story was the existence of Beeper Mini, which was an application designed to allow users on Android to use iMessage and become, I believe it's a blue bubble. I believe if you have iMessage, you are a blue bubble. Android users or non-iMessage users are relegated to lowly green bubble. And like I said, I didn't really feel like I had a whole lot to say about it. It seemed like a pretty straightforward story that did not need a whole lot of editorializing. But now there is sort of another thing happening, which normally I also probably really wouldn't bother getting into, but because it's getting wrapped up with that prior story in a way that I think might benefit from some exploring and explaining, we're going to actually dive in and talk about this stuff today. So the news story most recently is this one. Google Messages is blocking RCS texts on rooted Android phones. Now, this may not seem immediately all that crazy to some of you who are aware that when you root your device, you are likely to lose access to lots of things, like in the past, Google Pay, banking applications, basically things that involve money. And the reason that happens is pretty doggone similar to the reason why this is also happening. So that's pretty straightforward, but I guess I will very quickly sort of explain what's going on, and I will link to this article in the description down below in case you want to read it. But basically, some users have discovered that after rooting their device, even though RCS says it is connected, they are unable to send and receive messages. Of course, RCS, rich chat services, it's basically what Google is pushing as a replacement, a successor to SMS. If you use Google Messages as your primary texting app, you very likely are already using it. Maybe you don't even realize, but what it's going to give you is the ability to send and receive messages more quickly. It's going to give you much higher resolution multimedia sharing, so pictures and videos. It's going to give you typing information, so you can see if someone's typing or not, read receipts. It's basically a modern messaging system that lives alongside SMS, and of course, in any instance that RCS fails for some reason, it will just sort of revert back to SMS and MMS and get your message sent through that. So it's a good system. I'm a fan of RCS, and I think over the last few years, it has gotten very good. But like I said, users are discovering that after rooting their device, it's no longer functioning for them. And what I am seeing happening based on this news story is a lot of people sort of equivocating this with Apple's behavior regarding iMessage and basically saying people got really upset about what Apple was doing, but no one seems to care about this, and implying that that is because of a double standard. So I kind of want to dig into this a little bit and explain why I think that's mostly nonsense. So what does Apple do that people have been critical of? So the number one most obvious thing is that they restrict iMessage to only on their hardware. You can't use iMessage on anything but an Apple device. Now, I know that the EU has sort of weighed in on this, and there's a chance that they may do something. There's people that think that that's wrong, that iMessage should be available everywhere, or it should be interoperable. Now, that is an entirely different question. Okay, what is best for consumers is very complicated and difficult. But I want to tell you that from my perspective, I believe it is well within Apple's rights to have a product, have a piece of software for that product, and to have that only be on their hardware. I think it is totally within their rights to have iMessage be exclusive to Apple hardware. Again, whether or not that's best for consumers is a different question. So as a response to the fact that when an Android user messages or text messages specifically an Apple user, they are forced to use the old SMS protocol. Apple is apparently going to be adopting RCS sometime, I believe, was it this year or next year, sometime relatively soon. And that's going to make a lot of the stuff moot. But as a response to that current situation, this company comes along and they make something called Beeper Mini, which apparently sort of hijacks the iMessage system and allows an Android user to send a message over the iMessage, for lack of a better term, protocol. And of course, Apple stepped in and shut that down. Beeper tried to do something to get it working again. Apple shut it down again. There's been this cat and mouse thing back and forth, and people got mad that Apple was shutting Beeper Mini down. In a similar fashion to before, but actually much stronger for me, I believe Apple is, again, well within their rights to shut that down. And I, in fact, think that they are even in a more strong position, or they are in a stronger position with this than they are with having iMessage be an exclusive thing to them. Apple cannot allow a third-party company to jeopardize the security of iMessage, and that is what was happening. They were sneaking in it with various methods to get into this protocol, and I am shocked that anybody did not think Apple was going to shut that down almost immediately, and I'm even more shocked that anyone would criticize Apple for doing that. I have never owned a single iPhone. The last Apple product I owned was the original iPod Touch. I'm not an Apple person, but of course they were going to shut this down, and if I were running Apple, I would have done the exact same thing. This is a security risk. And that sort of brings us to where we are now with Google Messages blocking rooted users. Why are they blocking rooted users? It's for very similar reasons. It's because it is a security risk. Okay, there are now around 1 billion monthly RCS users. That install base is massive. Now, it's not as big as like WhatsApp, which has like 2.5 billion users, and we'll kind of double back to that in a second, but it is a massive user base, and because of that, it is a massive target for spoofers, for spammers, for scammers, for all sorts of different security problems. And what Google appears to have identified is that rooted Android devices are a significant source of these sorts of security risks. And because of that, and also because of the fact that, let's be honest, rooted Android phones probably make up, less than 5% of Android phones? It's definitely in the single digits. It's a very, very tiny minority. They've determined shutting them out of RCS is just the simplest, best answer for the other 95% of RCS users to keep them safe from this sort of nonsense. Basically, what we're saying here is the people that are scamming, spamming, spoofing, they're doing so using rooted Android devices that Google cannot guarantee meet the RCS guidelines, that Google cannot guarantee are not doing things they should not be doing with RCS, and so they're just shutting them out. Or at least they're trying to shut them out. I guess that's going to be another constant cat and mouse type thing. It does strike me as a little bit odd that no one seems to see a problem with this sort of thing when we're talking about money-related apps, banking apps that have done this for years. But when it comes to Google Messages, it is a huge problem. Perhaps people don't realize how effective these phishing messages actually are. Just because you're not fooled by them and it's never cost you any money doesn't mean no one gets fooled and no one ends up losing money. There's a reason these things are so pernicious. They are a major risk. It doesn't take a whole lot of research. Go on Google and search spam message and then iMessage. Spam message, WhatsApp, SMS, Telegram, pick a messaging app, and you're going to find reports of people getting these sorts of phishing type things on any messaging application. So this is a problem, and look, we have all known for decades it's a huge problem with email, but as people use email less and less, of course these things are moving to other messaging applications, and yes, they are a diverse set of messaging apps, which has helped, right? There isn't one messaging app that spammers can just attack directly like is the case for email. But as your messaging service gets a larger and larger user base, and something like RCS is only going to continue to grow as it does, I think, become this de facto replacement for SMS. Heck, Apple is going to adopt it in the next year's time or so, whatever that date was that you probably saw earlier in the video, or the time frame, I should say. It's going to explode in size over the next few years. So for Google to say, we're going to lock out these sorts of risky devices that are the source of these things, this does not seem like it should be controversial at all to me. But unfortunately, when we're talking about these sorts of things, it has all become incredibly partisan. Apple users felt like they were attacked when the iMessage beeper mini stuff was going on. So, of course, they see something that sounds somewhat similar and they're going to swing back as hard as they can. Personally, I think Apple and Google are both pretty darn justified for their actions. Although, I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments down below. There's tons of nuance to this stuff and stuff that I am just going to gloss over. I'm keeping this very surface level, and I'm sure some of you are going to feel the need to correct me on whatever it is that I inevitably got wrong in your eyes. But again, that's just where I'm at. I don't think any of this stuff should be all that controversial, but hit those comments down below, guys. Subscribe for more content just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.